"Are you alone, Mom?" My son asks me that question every single night at exactly 12:01 a.m. He doesn't ask how I'm feeling, or if I've eaten, or whether my knees are acting up again. He doesn't ask if I locked the doors or turned off the stove. Just that one question, "Are you alone?" Spoken flat, almost casually, as if the answer were a simple detail he needed to confirm. And when I answer, he hangs up. No goodbye, no warmth, just the click of the line going dead. I've been living with these calls for nearly 3 months now, and I need to tell this story the way it really happened plainly, honestly, because last night, for the first time, I lied to my son. And I believe that lie is the only reason I'm still breathing. My name is Ruth Carter. I'm 62 years old, African American, and I've been a widow for 15 years. I live alone in the house my parents left me, a modest one-story place just outside Cleveland, Ohio. It's not fancy, but it's solid. It's held 3 generations of our family, and until recently, it held my sense of safety too. I still cook my own meals. I still drive myself to the grocery store and volunteer at the library twice a week. I say this because I don't want anyone imagining a fragile old woman who startles at shadows. I've lived a full life. I've buried my husband, raised a child alone, survived losses that reshaped me, but nothing prepared me for the way my own son's voice would begin to make my hands shake. Marcus is my only child. I raised him after his father, James, died suddenly of a heart attack when Marcus was 10. I worked long hours, skipped vacations, and put my own dreams on hold so my son would never feel abandoned. He grew up smart, quiet, disciplined. I was proud of him. I still am, though that word feels complicated now. The calls began without warning. The first time, I answered with concern, thinking something had gone wrong. "Mom," Marcus said, "are you alone?" "Yes," I replied, confused. "Why?" "Okay, click." I stood in my kitchen staring at the phone, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, telling myself it was nothing. Stress, a mistake, grief resurfacing after his divorce. But then it happened again, and again. Always at 12:01 a.m. Not midnight, not later. Always 1 minute past, as precise as a clock he was watching somewhere else. After a while, my body learned the pattern. I'd wake up before the phone rang, my heart already tight in my chest. I started leaving the lamp on in the living room, started checking the locks twice, then 3 times. When I told him I was alone, he hung up immediately. When I mentioned that someone had stopped by my neighbor, Helen, a church friend, his voice changed. He'd asked too many questions. Where were they sitting? How long would they stay? When were they leaving? One night, I tried to joke about it. "Marcus," I said lightly, "you sound like you're checking up on me." There was a pause, and then his voice dropped, low and cold. "You always cared more about him than you ever did about me." I froze. "What?" I whispered. "You loved Dad more," he continued, his tone flat, stripped of emotion. "You chose him. Every time." The way he said it made my skin crawl. There was no anger in his voice, no pain, just certainty. "Marcus," I said, my hand trembling around the phone, "that's not true. I loved you both." He let out a quiet, humorless breath. "Good night, Mom." The line went dead. I sat there shaking, my chest tight, my mind racing. James had been gone for 15 years. My husband's death had nearly destroyed me, but I'd survived for Marcus. Everything I did after that was for him. To hear my son speak like that, so detached, so final, made something cold settle in my stomach. That same night, I noticed something else. The framed photo of James and me, the one from our 20th anniversary, was gone from the mantel above the small prayer altar in my living room. I searched the room, then the bedroom, then the hallway. My heart started pounding harder with every step. Finally, I opened the drawer beneath the altar. The photo was inside, but James's face had been carefully cut out. Only mine remained. I screamed. My knees gave out beneath me, and I fell hard onto the wooden floor. Pain shot through my hip, and I felt something warm spreading down my shin. When I looked down, blood was pooling on the floor, dark against the wood. I crawled back, sobbing, pressing my hand to the cut, my mind screaming one thought over and over: someone has been in my house. I cleaned myself up, wrapped my leg, and sat there until dawn, afraid to move, afraid to sleep. By morning, I told myself it was stress. that I must have misplaced the photo and damaged it myself without remembering. But deep down, I knew better. Last night, I sat in my recliner with my mother's old quilt over my knees, my phone resting on the armrest beside me. I was waiting for the call. My heart was already racing when the screen lit up at 12:01. "Marcus calling," I answered. "Are you alone, Mom?" His voice was calm, expectant. I opened my mouth to say yes. The word was already forming. Then I saw the drawer in my mind, the photo, my face alone where my husband's had been. "No," I said instead, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers hurt. "I'm not alone." The silence that followed was different, heavier. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice sharper now. "A friend," I lied, "helping me with some paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" he pressed. "House documents," I said. "Insurance, old things." Another pause. I could hear his breathing, slow and controlled. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll talk tomorrow." He hung up. I sat there in the dim light, my leg throbbing, my heart pounding, knowing something had shifted. I hadn't planned to lie. It came out of instinct, like my body understood the danger before my mind could. I didn't yet know what my son was planning, but I knew this much with terrifying clarity. Marcus wasn't calling to see if I was safe. He was calling to make sure no one else was there to stop him. If this gave you chills, drop a like and comment where you're watching from. You might not be the only one in your city hearing this tonight. The morning after I lied to Marcus, the house was so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. I hadn't slept. I'd sat upright in my recliner all night, one hand gripping the phone, the other resting on my leg where the bandage from the fall was already beginning to soak through. Every creak, every wind rattle against the windows made my heart leap. The lie still echoed in my ears. I'm not alone. It had bought me time, but time for what I didn't yet know. Sunlight began to creep across the floor, and I pushed myself up slowly, the stiffness in my bones, a cruel reminder that I was no longer young. My body protested with every step toward the kitchen. I flicked on the old coffee maker and stood by the sink, watching as the machine sputtered to life, its hiss and drip the only sounds keeping me grounded. Outside, the street was calm. Birds picked at something by the curb. Across the way, Mr. Hanley, my neighbor, was already trimming his hedges. I waved faintly when he looked up, but I didn't step outside. Not yet. I reached for the small wooden box I kept on the windowsill beside the kitchen sink. Inside were old church bulletins, expired coupons, and the folded letter James had written me on our 25th anniversary, his handwriting strong and even, the ink slightly smudged from my tears. I sat down at the kitchen table and read it again. To my Ruth, you've held this family together with grit and grace. You've given more than anyone could ask for. I don't say it enough, but I see you. I see the way you love, and I will carry that with me always. I pressed the paper to my chest and shut my eyes. I needed to remember who I was before all this, before the cold voice of my only child began twisting the walls of this house into something foreign. But the house remembered me, even if he didn't. After breakfast, I began my routine. I moved slow, limping slightly on my sore leg, but I forced myself through it. I dusted the mantel, wiped down the counters, swept the back porch. I needed to prove, if only to myself, that I still had some control. I was placing clean towels in the linen closet when something caught my eye. The photo. The same photo, the one Marcus had cut, the one I had hidden back in the drawer after my fall. It was sitting on the hallway console table, face up, as if it had always been there. I stood frozen, a small towel clutched in my hand. James's face was still missing. Only my image remained, smiling beside a void. I reached for it slowly, my fingers trembling. The paper was cold, too cold, and when I flipped it over, I saw something written in faint pencil. He watched you more than you knew. My breath caught, my vision blurred. I stumbled back, knocking over a vase that shattered across the floor. I don't remember falling, only that suddenly I was on my knees again, the cold tiles biting into my skin. I tried to stand, but my legs betrayed me. Panic welled in my chest. The quiet of the house now felt suffocating, like it was pressing in from every wall. I had to get out. I pulled myself up using the doorknob and opened the front door, letting in a rush of air that tasted like wet grass and distant rain. The sunlight hit me hard, too bright after the dim of the house. "Ruth? You all right over there?" I turned. Mr. Hanley was squinting at me from across the yard, clippers in one hand. I forced a smile. "Just dropped something. I'm fine." He nodded, though I could see doubt in his eyes. "Well, you let me know if you need anything." I nodded. "Thank you." I closed the door again, slower this time. But I didn't feel fine. That photo hadn't moved itself. Those words hadn't appeared by magic. Someone had been in my house. Again. I checked the locks: front door, back door, windows, all secure, no signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. But it was like someone had rearranged my memories just enough to make me question their shape. I sat back down at the kitchen table and reached for my cell phone. My thumb hovered over Marcus's name. I wanted to believe this was all some misunderstanding, some late-onset paranoia. Maybe I needed to see a doctor. Maybe grief had found new, cruel ways to echo. But I didn't press the call button. Instead, I opened the contacts list and scrolled to the name I hadn't touched in years: Amanda Lewis. We'd met back when she was an assistant D.A. in Cleveland. She'd gone on to open her own practice and always said I could call her if I ever needed legal clarity, as she put it. Back then, I never imagined needing clarity about my own child. I hesitated, then hit call. It rang twice. "Ruth!" Amanda's voice was warm, surprised. "Good Lord, it's been years." "I know," I said, swallowing hard. "Amanda, I need your help, and I need you not to think I've lost my mind." "Okay," she said slowly. "You've got my full attention. Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the nightly calls, the photo, the cut face, the strange noises, the sense that someone was moving things around when I wasn't looking. The lie I told. The way Marcus spoke, flat, detached, like someone rehearsing a part they didn't believe in. When I finished, Amanda was quiet for a beat. "Have you checked your security system?" she asked. "I don't have one." "Then we start there," she said firmly. "Ruth, I believe you. And if you're feeling unsafe, we need to gather evidence. Discreetly." I exhaled, some small part of the tension inside me loosening. "We'll get you a camera," she continued. "Something small, motion-activated. And Ruth? Yes? I've seen a lot in my line of work. But I've also seen how good people hesitate to protect themselves from those they love." My chest tightened. "He's still my son," I said softly. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm going to help you stay alive long enough to keep loving him, however that ends up looking." I ended the call and sat there, staring at my reflection in the microwave door. For a long time, I didn't move. Then, slowly, I reached for the photo again. This time, I didn't cry. I placed it back in the drawer, but this time, I locked it. The house remembered who I was. Now it was time for me to remember, too. The next night, I didn't wait in the recliner. I sat at the kitchen table instead, fully dressed, with the front porch light on and every lamp in the living room burning. My Bible lay closed in front of me, untouched. I had read it cover to cover at least a dozen times over the years, always finding peace between its pages, but tonight, peace felt like something I'd misplaced a long time ago. The clock on the microwave blinked. 12 a.m. 1 minute to go. I stared at my phone on the table. The screen was dark, but I knew it was coming. Every night, like clockwork. And this time, I would listen more carefully. Not just to Marcus's voice, but to the pattern. Because something was off. It had been off. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I didn't want to believe that the boy I'd raised, the boy who used to fall asleep curled beside me during thunderstorms, who used to draw pictures of us holding hands, was someone I needed to protect myself from. 12:01 a.m. The phone lit up. "Marcus calling." I answered. "Are you alone, Mom?" Same tone, same cadence. Like a ritual, almost. But tonight, my ears picked up something new. A hint of tension in the way he said, "Mom," like he had to remind himself to use it. A hesitation, maybe half a second, before the word "alone." My heartbeat thundered in my chest. "Yes," I said quietly, "I'm alone." There was a pause. Longer than usual. "Okay," he said. Then click. The line went dead. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the empty static of a call that no longer existed. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened my notebook. It was a lined spiral notepad I'd bought on sale at Walgreens, the kind with a thin cardboard cover and a fraying spiral wire. I had scribbled dates and times on the first page, starting 3 months back. Each night Marcus had called, I'd written it down. At first, just out of curiosity, then out of concern. Now, it was evidence. I drew a ruler down the margin, making columns: date, time, answer given, reaction, notes. March 8. 12:1 M. Yes, alone. Okay. Click. March 9. 12:1 Yes, okay. Click. March 10. 12:1 Said Helen visited. Marcus asked 5 questions, sounded irritated. March 11. 12:1 Said not alone, voice tense, asked who and why. I kept going, night by night. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. When I said I was alone, he was satisfied. When I said someone had been there or might be there, he reacted. Not with concern, not protectively, but with resistance, as if he didn't like it, as if my being alone wasn't a worry. It was a requirement. I circled that line in red ink. Requirement. It hit me like a wave. This wasn't about checking on me. This wasn't even about control. It was about access. I stood up from the table too fast and had to grab the back of the chair to steady myself. The throb in my injured leg reminded me that my body wasn't ready to keep up with my mind's panic. But something in me had shifted. I walked to the hallway and opened the drawer of the console table again. The photo was still there, James's face still missing. The edges of the cut were jagged, rushed, like someone had done it in a moment of fury or obsession. I held the photo to my chest, the paper soft from years of age, and looked toward the altar in the living room, the place where I used to pray, light candles, whisper to the memory of my husband in the stillness of morning. I realized I hadn't lit that candle in months. I had been so busy doubting myself, so consumed by Marcus's calls and the creeping dread in my home, that I had stopped doing the things that made me feel human. I walked over, lit the small white candle, and let its glow chase away the shadows. The photo stayed in my hand. A memory came to me then. James and I sitting on the porch, late summer, the air thick with heat and laughter. Marcus was maybe 8, running barefoot through the grass, chasing fireflies with a mason jar. Back then, he'd laugh like he meant it. He'd fall asleep with his sneakers still on, smelling of earth and boyhood. When did he stop laughing like that? I didn't know. Later that day, Amanda came by. She arrived in her navy blue sedan, looking exactly the way I remembered her, composed, sharp, the kind of woman who carried calm like armor. She wore slacks, a cardigan, and a purse that probably held more legal files than makeup. I brought you something, she said, stepping inside. She pulled a small box from her bag, a discreet motion-activated camera. She showed me how to use it, how to check the footage from my phone. Put this in a spot where it won't be noticed, she said, facing the hallway, near the back door. We did it together. She placed another one in the kitchen, just beneath the cabinet where the coffee mugs were stacked. Any other strange signs? She asked. I hesitated. There was something written. On the back of the photo, Amanda raised an eyebrow. What did it say? He watched you more than you knew. Her lips pressed together in a tight line. Ruth, has Marcus ever been treated for anything, mental health-wise? I shook my head. Not officially. He was quiet, withdrawn after the divorce. But I just thought he was coping. Amanda sat down at the table, folding her hands. I'm not here to scare you, she said. But I've worked on enough cases to know the difference between concern and obsession. If he's entering your home without your knowledge, if he's altering things in your environment, it's a pattern, and it usually escalates. My blood ran cold. I thought of the photo, the drawer, the rug, the way I'd woken one night convinced I'd heard a footstep by my bedroom door. I hadn't even told Amanda that yet. It feels like I swallowed, like he's trying to erase James. Or, Amanda said carefully, trying to get back something he thinks you took from him. I stared at the candle, now melted halfway down. He's my son. He's also a man who might be dangerous. The truth of that landed like a weight on my chest. We made tea. Amanda wrote down her number again, insisted I call her if anything changed. She promised to check the footage with me the next day. After she left, I sat in the kitchen again, notebook open, pen in hand. I drew a new line on the page. Pattern equals isolation, compliance, erasure. I didn't know what came next, but I knew enough now not to pretend this was normal. I looked around my house, my home, and for the first time, I saw it not as a place of safety, but as something I had to defend. From what? I still didn't know, but I was going to find out. That night, I didn't sit in my recliner. I didn't sit at the kitchen table either. I was too restless, too aware of every tick, every creak, every whisper of the house settling into its nightly hush. I kept moving, from room to room, as if the motion alone might keep the fear from catching up with me. At 11:50 p.m., I found myself standing in the hallway, facing the small photo of James and me still missing his face. It sat once again in that drawer by the console table where I had locked it after Amanda's visit. But I'd checked earlier in the day, and it had been moved. Not far, just a few inches askew. Someone had opened that drawer. Again. The front and back doors were locked, no windows broken, no signs of forced entry. But someone had been inside. I turned and made my way to the kitchen. Amanda's tiny motion camera blinked faintly from beneath the cabinet. It was hidden well. I'd watched her test it, play back the footage, show me how to check recordings from my phone. Now it was on. Recording. Waiting. At 12:01 a.m., the phone rang. Marcus calling. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen, feeling my hand go cold. When I finally picked up, I pressed the phone slowly to my ear. "Are you alone, Mom?" The words were exactly the same, but his voice was different tonight. Slower, heavier, like he was watching something while he spoke. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, but I could feel the lie vibrating in my bones. "Okay," he said. Then click. I stood there in the kitchen for several long seconds after the call ended, staring at the closed door to the basement. That door hadn't been used in months. We kept old storage boxes down there, holiday decorations, James's old fishing gear, boxes of Marcus's childhood art projects. I rarely went down. The stairs were steep, and my knees didn't like them. But tonight, something gnawed at me. I picked up the flashlight from under the sink and opened the basement door. The smell of dust and cool concrete hit me instantly. I took the steps one at a time, gripping the railing, the beam of the flashlight dancing ahead of me. The basement was quiet. Still, I swept the light across the room. Boxes, plastic bins, my old sewing table. Nothing seemed out of place. But then I heard it. A soft creak not from behind me, but directly above. From the living room floorboards. I froze. Another step. Someone was walking through my house. I turned off the flashlight and stood in the dark, heart pounding so loudly I thought whoever it was might hear it through the walls. My mind raced. I had locked the doors. I had checked them myself twice. So how? Was he already inside when I checked? Had he been in here all evening? The footsteps grew fainter, then stopped altogether. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, with legs trembling and breath caught in my throat, I climbed back up the stairs and peeked through the crack in the basement door. Nothing. The living room was empty. I stepped out slowly, locking the basement door behind me out of instinct, though I knew it wouldn't matter if someone had keys or worse, new ways around locks. I made my way back to the kitchen and pulled out my phone. I opened the camera app Amanda had installed and tapped into the live feed. The kitchen view loaded first. Nothing there. Then the hallway. I held my breath. For a second, just one I saw it. The back of a man moving past the hallway. Not looking at the camera. Just passing through. Like a shadow. Like he belonged there. And then gone. The footage froze. My phone glitched, then kicked me back to the home screen. I stared at the device in my hand, unable to move. Unable to speak. He had been inside. He'd walked past that camera. He had known where it was. And he hadn't even looked surprised. I didn't sleep that night. I locked myself in my bedroom and pushed a chair against the door like I was in some crime show on TV. I didn't even know if that would help. I just needed something, anything, to make me feel less helpless. By morning, the house felt normal again. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. The birds chirped outside. My neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel, like clockwork. But inside me, everything had changed. I waited until 9 a.m. sharp, then called Amanda. When she picked up, I didn't even say hello. "He was inside," I whispered. Silence. Then, "What do you mean?" "I saw him. On the footage. Just for a second, he walked past the hallway camera like he'd done it before. Amanda's voice sharpened. "You're sure it was Marcus?" I couldn't see his face, I admitted. Just his back. But his build, his walk. It was him. Amanda. It was him. "I'm coming over," she said immediately. "Do not open the door unless it's me." I spent the next 30 minutes pacing the kitchen, checking the windows, double-locking the front door. When Amanda finally arrived, I flung the door open before she even knocked. She came in, calm but focused, her bag already open, laptop in hand. "Let me see the footage," she said. I handed her my phone. She connected it to her laptop and pulled up the files. We watched the moment together. The hallway camera. A tall, broad figure walking past, back turned to the lens. He wore dark clothes, moved quietly. He didn't glance toward the camera, didn't hesitate. "He knew it was there," Amanda muttered. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said, closing the laptop with a snap, "that someone told him where it was. Or he already knew because he's been inside more than once." My knees buckled slightly. I gripped the countertop to steady myself. "Do you have keys hidden anywhere?" she asked. "Outside? Under a mat? In a plant pot?" I shook my head. "I used to, but I stopped. Months ago." Amanda looked around the house, eyes scanning. "It's possible he made copies. If he had access before, if you trusted him." I swallowed. "He's my son. I never thought I had a reason not to." Amanda's face softened. "We're going to change the locks. Today, we'll get a full set of smart locks installed, and we'll add motion sensors, real ones, not just cameras." I nodded. "Okay. I also want you to think about staying somewhere else. A hotel, a friend's house, just for a few nights." I paused. I looked around my home, the place where I raised my son, where I buried my husband, where I folded laundry and baked cornbread and cried over photo albums. "If I leave," I whispered, "he'll win." Amanda placed a hand gently on mine. "No," she said, "you're not leaving because you're scared. You're stepping back so we can plan your next move." I looked her in the eye and saw what she meant. This wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about survival. By 0 p.m. that same day, the locksmith had come and gone. Amanda had paid for everything up front. Smart locks for both the front and back doors, a new keypad entry system, and small magnetic contacts on every window that would chime if opened. "It's not Fort Knox," she said, "but it'll slow him down and alert you." I stood at the threshold of the living room watching the locksmith's van disappear down the street. I still held the user manual for the lock in my hand, but I hadn't looked at it yet. My fingers trembled slightly, not from age, not from pain, but from the weight of what we'd just done. Changing the locks on your own child isn't just a physical act. It's a line you don't think you'll ever have to cross. Amanda stayed another hour, walking through safety protocols with me, insisting I text her before bed. She even installed a panic button app on my phone and set it to dial both 911 and her number with one tap. "You press this if anything, and I mean anything feels wrong," she said. I nodded, but I didn't tell her the part I couldn't shake. The feeling that Marcus was already one step ahead of us. After she left, I moved through the house like a woman in someone else's skin. Each room looked the same as always, the quilt draped on the back of the couch, James's cufflinks still resting in the tray on the dresser, but now everything carried a question mark. Had he been in this room? Had he touched this? Watched me from here? I forced myself to sit down and open my notebook again. I added a new entry. April 18, 12:1 said yes, alone. Heard footsteps upstairs during call. Watched hallway footage. Figure passed by camera. Confirmed mail. Unknown if Marcus, but probable. Locks changed. Smart system installed. Amanda advised possible temporary relocation. And then, in a smaller note beneath that, feeling split between grief and rage. Because that's what it was now. Not just fear. Rage. How dare he take this from me, this peace, this home, this fragile trust I had so carefully built since James died. How dare he twist the love I gave him into something sharp enough to wound me with. I made myself some soup, chicken, and wild rice, just like James used to love, and sat at the kitchen table, spooning it slowly, letting the warmth soothe the ache that had settled deep in my bones. The ache that wasn't arthritis, wasn't age. It was betrayal. After cleaning up, I wandered back into the living room to water the ficus in the corner. As I bent to pour water into the soil, something caught my eye, something just under the edge of the couch. I set the watering can down and knelt. There, half tucked beneath the baseboard, was a folded piece of paper. At first, I thought it was junk mail, a flyer, but the moment I touched it, I knew better. The paper was thick, a stationery James used to keep in his desk. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. There was no salutation, no date, just one sentence written in a hand I hadn't seen in over a decade. "If you find this, it means I never told you what I should have." I blinked. Read it again. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was James's. I stood up slowly. The note clutched to my chest as memories surged forward like floodwaters. James had always been private, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who believed in silent sacrifice. He worked long hours as an insurance claims adjuster, rarely took a day off, and never once raised his voice in our home. But he'd also been secretive in a way I'd long ago accepted as part of his nature. Now, I wasn't so sure that had been harmless. I searched the house with new eyes. Went back to the old roll-top desk in the spare bedroom that we'd never really used since James passed. I had cleaned it out once, years ago, but hadn't touched it since. This time, I pulled every drawer all the way out, lifted the bottom panels, tapped along the back, and in the bottom drawer, hidden between the wood and the lining, I found another note, this one longer. I sat down right there on the floor and read, "Ruth, there's something about Marcus you need to know. I've seen things, heard things. I didn't want to believe it at first. What boy wants to think his own son might be broken? But he hurt the neighbor's cat when he was 10. You remember Mrs. Kilpatrick's tabby? He didn't just find it dead. He made it that way. I covered it up. I told myself it was a mistake, a childish impulse. But then there were more signs. He lied, manipulated, said things to me in the dark that chilled my blood. I tried to talk to him, tried to reach him, but it only made him colder. Ruth, if I'm gone, and you're reading this, be careful. He doesn't love the way you think he does." I couldn't breathe. The note slipped from my hands. James had known. He had seen it early on. The coldness, the calculation, and he had tried to protect me. In his own quiet way. But I hadn't known. I hadn't let myself know. My whole body shook. My throat went dry. I felt the sharp press of something behind my ribs, grief, shame, fury all folded into one. I picked up the note and held it to my chest. My son was not who I thought he was. He hadn't been for a long, long time. That night, I didn't wait in the kitchen. I took the notes, the photo, my notebook, and the spare key Amanda had left, and I locked myself in the master bedroom. I wedged a chair against the door again. I laid James's notes beneath my pillow. When the phone rang at 12:01 a.m., I stared at the screen. Marcus calling. I didn't answer. I let it ring. Once, twice, 5 times. Then voicemail. I waited. And then it came the message notification. I played it, holding the phone to my ear with fingers that barely felt real. "You didn't answer tonight." Silence. Then, "Are you with someone?" A long pause. "I hope not." Click. I deleted the voicemail, and I whispered into the dark, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The next morning, I awoke with the sense that I'd barely slept at all. My neck ached from the way I'd curled around the pillow, clutching James's letters like they were the only thing keeping me tethered to the truth. I hadn't dreamed, or if I had, they hadn't dared come close. What woke me wasn't the sun or the birds or even my bladder, it was silence. Not peaceful silence, heavy silence, like the house itself was holding its breath again. I sat up slowly, still in yesterday's clothes, and noticed right away that something wasn't right. The candle on the altar, the one I'd lit the night before, was out. Not melted, not burned down, just snuffed, and the wick was wet. I stood, my breath catching in my throat. I had been the only one in the house. Hadn't I? The chair was still pressed against the bedroom door, just as I'd left it. The locks hadn't been tampered with. The hallway outside was empty. Still, my chest tightened as I moved through the house, checking each room. Then I found it. The small bathroom window in the hallway, the one above the old laundry basket. It was open, just barely, just enough to let in air or let someone out. I hadn't opened it. I was sure of it. I leaned close, studying the sill. Dust, but disturbed. A faint smudge, like the print of a palm or the side of a shoe brushing against it. I stepped back, my mind racing. I hadn't heard anything, but maybe I hadn't needed to. Maybe that was the point. He wanted me to know he could still get in, that nowhere in this house was truly mine anymore. I sat on the closed toilet lid, pressing the heel of my hand against my chest as my heartbeat pounded beneath my ribs. I wasn't just afraid now, I was furious, rattled, disoriented. I needed air. I grabbed my purse, keys, and James's letters, slipped on my sandals, and left the house without locking the door. I couldn't stay, not in that moment. I drove without thinking, letting muscle memory guide me. Down Maple, past the high school, past the old bakery that had turned into a vape shop. The trees lining the road shimmered in the early light, and every time I passed a shadowed corner, I checked the rearview mirror twice. I found myself in front of the church. St. Margaret's, the place where James and I had been married, where Marcus had been baptized. I hadn't been back in over a year. Not since the Christmas service where I'd sat in the back and cried for reasons I couldn't name. But now, my hands shook as I pushed the wooden doors open and stepped into the cool, quiet space. It smelled like old wood, candles, and the faintest trace of lilies. I sat in the third pew from the front, clutching my purse, the letters still inside. I didn't pray. I just breathed. After a while, I heard footsteps approaching. A soft voice broke the silence. "Ruth?" I turned. It was Sister Evelyn. She was older than I, remembered her short white curls, now more silver than snow, but her eyes were just as kind. "I thought I might find you here," she said, easing herself down beside me. "Your name's been on my heart." "I didn't plan to come," I said. "I just ended up here." "Sometimes," she said. "That's exactly how the Holy Spirit works." I nodded, blinking back the sting behind my eyes. We sat in silence for a moment before I spoke again. "Evelyn, have you ever been afraid of your own child?" She looked at me, her face softening. "I've counseled more mothers than I can count," she said. "And I can tell you this love doesn't make us blind. It makes us willingly blind, until we can't be anymore." I reached into my purse and handed her James's letter, the one I'd found behind the desk. She read it slowly, carefully, her lips pressed into a thin line. When she finished, she folded it neatly and handed it back. "You believed Marcus could never hurt you," she said gently. "That's not weakness, that's motherhood." "But he's changed," I whispered. Evelyn hesitated. "No, Ruth. I think this is who he's been. The question now is, what will you do to protect yourself?" I looked up at the stained glass window above the altar, the morning sun casting colors across the floor like a soft patchwork quilt. "I don't know." "You do," she said. "But it's hard, because it feels like choosing between safety and loyalty." I nodded, and I knew in that moment that I had to choose. Not later. Not after another call. Now, back at home, I entered carefully. The door was still unlocked, just as I'd left it. But nothing was missing. Nothing out of place. The air smelled like lemon oil and wood polish, as if the house had cleaned itself in my absence. I checked the footage from the night before. The hallway camera. Nothing. The kitchen feed. Nothing. The back door view. Black screen. I frowned. I tapped the play button again. Still nothing. Then I noticed a small line of text at the bottom. Footage unavailable. Camera disconnected. My stomach dropped. I checked the device under the cabinet. Unplugged. Carefully. Deliberately. Amanda's words came back to me. "He's been here before. He knows the layout. He knows you." I plugged the camera back in and called her. "He was inside again," I said. The bathroom window was open. One of the cameras was unplugged. She didn't even hesitate. "Ruth, pack a bag. Right now, you're coming with me." "I can't." "You can. You will. For one night. Just until we figure out what to do next." I looked around my house. At the quilt, at the picture, at the memories we'd built. And then I walked into my bedroom, pulled out a weekend bag, and packed. I left a light on in every room. I locked the front door behind me. And I didn't look back. Not yet. Amanda lived in a modest 2-bedroom ranch-style home just 15 minutes from mine. It was the kind of place that said comfort over flash-wide porch, a ceramic wind chime that clinked softly in the breeze, and a border of petunias that needed pruning but made the entrance look lived in. She welcomed me with a pot of decaf and a plate of lemon shortbread cookies that crumbled like sand in my mouth. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself until I sank into her guest room bed that night. For the first time in weeks, I didn't brace for footsteps in the hallway. I didn't sleep with one eye open or with my hand curled around my cell phone like a lifeline. Amanda had insisted I power off my phone completely. If he's tracking it, even passively, we need to make it look like you've gone quiet, she explained. I didn't ask how she knew about things like that. Some part of me didn't want to know. The next morning, I woke to the smell of scrambled eggs and turkey bacon. A radio murmured soft jazz from the kitchen. It felt almost normal, like stepping into someone else's unbroken life. I sat at Amanda's table while she spooned eggs onto my plate and handed me a cup of coffee. You slept like the dead, she said, smiling gently. I didn't realize how much I needed to. She poured herself a cup and sat across from me. We need to talk next steps, she said. I nodded, still a bit groggy. Let me show you something, she added, pulling out her laptop and opening a file. It was a spreadsheet, dates, times, phone logs, cross-referenced with Marcus's known locations from public databases, employment records, court dockets. Where did you get all this? I asked, blinking. I have friends, she said, tapping a line with her nail. Look here. The week James passed, Marcus made 5 cash withdrawals totaling nearly $18,000 from your joint account with James, all within 3 days. My stomach turned. I never knew, I whispered. You wouldn't. The account wasn't in your name. It was his and James's. But James never said. She gave me a look. James may not have known. I think Marcus had access long before that. And after James's stroke, well, you were overwhelmed. He used that. She pulled up a second screen. There's more. I didn't think I could take more. But I looked. Hospital records. A nurse's complaint logged but never formally filed. James's last stay in the rehab facility. A note in the margin, son hostile, refused care instructions. Patient appeared agitated in son's presence. I covered my mouth. I always thought James's condition worsened because of the stroke, I said softly. I never imagined. Amanda reached out, resting a hand on mine. Ruth, listen to me. You are not to blame for what Marcus has become. You loved him the best way you knew how. You believed he could be better. That's not weakness. That's grace. I nodded, but the words scraped against the inside of my chest. What do I do now? I asked. Amanda sat back. We collect. We watch. We don't confront him yet. Not until we have more. She hesitated. And we document everything. Which means, she slid a recorder across the table. You're going to tell your story, all of it, on tape. For the record. I stared at it. What if it ends up being nothing? I whispered. What if I'm just a paranoid old woman who's lost too much and can't tell the difference between grief and danger? Amanda leaned forward. Then the worst thing that happens is we have a story that never gets heard. But if you're right, and I think you are, it could save your life. I picked up the recorder, clicked it on, and I began. My name is Ruth Margaret Delaney. I'm 67 years old, widow, mother of 1 son. His name is Marcus James Delaney, and I no longer feel safe in my home. The words echoed back at me. A confession, a curse, a plea. That afternoon, Amanda drove us back to my house. The air was cool, tinged with rain, and the trees outside had turned darker, their branches heavy with spring bloom and something heavier I couldn't name. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw something that made me stop breathing. A vase, sitting on the front porch. Ceramic, white with blue hydrangeas painted along the sides. One I hadn't owned in years. I climbed out of the car and approached it slowly. Inside were 3 things. A sprig of dried lavender, a matchbook from a diner we used to visit when Marcus was little, and a torn piece of newspaper with the words circled in red pen, Mother found dead after weeks of harassment. My knees buckled. Amanda caught me before I hit the porch steps. It's a message, I gasped. He's saying I'm next. She didn't argue. She just helped me inside, sat me down, and checked every door and window, every camera. Everything was still intact. Except me. Inside, I was coming apart at the seams. That night, we installed a second camera in the hallway, one hidden behind the bookshelf. Amanda stayed over. I slept with the recorder by my bed, and just before midnight, I whispered into it again. If something happens to me, if I don't wake up one morning, let them know. He was never just checking in. He was counting down. The wind woke me before the phone did. It howled through the trees, a low, mournful sound that rattled the gutters and made the windows groan in their frames. Rain had begun to tap against the glass, steady and thin, like fingers drumming out a warning only the sleepless could hear. Amanda was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in the flannel blanket I kept folded in the linen chest. The house was dark, except for the soft blue glow from the smart lock panel near the front door. It read, "System armed, all secure." But nothing felt secure anymore. At 12:01 a.m., the phone rang. I watched the screen light up from the hallway. Marcus calling. I didn't move to answer it. I just stood in the shadows, letting the ring buzz like a distant alarm, something I no longer had to obey. It went to voicemail. I waited for the message, but none came. "No, are you alone?" No voice. Just silence. At 12:03, Amanda stirred. She sat up slowly, blinking. "He called?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. I nodded. "Didn't leave a message." She rubbed her face. "That's a change. Feels like the kind of quiet that comes before something worse," I said softly. Amanda stood and stretched. "Then we keep watching." We reviewed the feeds from every camera. Nothing. No movement, no glitches, no shadows walking past hallway corners. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something had shifted. The next morning, Amanda left briefly to pick up supplies and meet with someone she referred to only as a friend from the DA's office. She didn't explain, and I didn't press. Every time she returned from one of those errands, she brought back pieces of a puzzle I didn't know we were solving. While she was gone, I decided to clean. Not because the house was dirty, but because it felt like the only thing left I could control. I started in the hallway closet. Winter coats, old scarves, a box of James's tools. Nothing strange, nothing new. Then I moved to the spare bedroom. I opened the closet and stopped cold. On the top shelf, tucked neatly between a folded quilt and a stack of yellowed magazines, was an old shoebox. I hadn't put it there. I took it down, heart already pounding. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Most were of me, taken through windows, door frames, from across the street. One from inside my bedroom window, one I knew had been closed and curtained. In every photo, I looked tired, lost in thought, alone. Some had dates written in red ink. Others were marked with an X. At the bottom of the box was an envelope with my name on it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Do you finally see it now? You were never meant to be alone. You chose that. You chose him. You always chose him. No signature." But I didn't need one. The ink was the same as the newspaper clipping. The slant of the letters, the pressure on the pen. Marcus. I sank onto the edge of the bed and clutched the photos to my chest. My hands shook so badly I thought I might drop them. He'd been watching me for months, maybe longer, and I hadn't seen it, hadn't felt it, had brushed off every shadow, every creak, every breath of air on the back of my neck as just the house settling. But this wasn't the house. This was him. A storm broke outside. Thunder rolled in, low and rumbling, like the house itself had begun to growl. I ran back to the living room just as Amanda returned. I held the box out to her without a word. She didn't speak either. Just set it on the table and pulled out a pair of latex gloves from her purse. We went through every photo, every corner of the envelope. Amanda took pictures of them all with her phone, documenting the evidence. Finally, she looked at me. "Ruth, I need to tell you something." I braced myself. I ran Marcus's name through a few back channels, nothing criminal on his record. But she opened a new file on her phone. "He's been applying for legal guardianship of you. Filed a preliminary motion 2 weeks ago in another county." I stared at her. "What?" "He listed your declining mental health as the reason. Claimed you were hallucinating, paranoid, that you'd injured yourself falling and refused medical attention. He even included a photo of the altar, said it showed you were talking to your dead husband." My jaw dropped. "That altar's been there for years. He's building a case, Ruth, one where you're the unstable one. So when he moves in or when something happens, he can say, "See, I tried to help her. She was slipping." My voice cracked. But why? Why would he want control of me like that? Amanda's voice was gentle. For the house, the assets, maybe even your pension. But more than that, she tapped the side of her temple. Control. This isn't just about money. It's about owning the narrative. He wants the world to believe you were the problem, that he was the son trying to help. I felt the ground shift beneath me again. But now, Amanda added, holding up a photo of me eating soup at my kitchen table, taken through the window, we have something he can't explain away. That night, Amanda installed a third camera, this one facing the back patio. We double-checked every lock, and I made a decision. No more hiding. No more whispering into recorders like a ghost in my own life. I would tell my story, publicly, if I had to. I would leave breadcrumbs behind, evidence, letters, proof that I had seen it coming, that I wasn't crazy. Just a mother trying to survive her son. It happened on a Wednesday. I remember because I'd just come back from the pharmacy, my arthritis medication had run out, and I didn't want to bother Amanda for a ride. The cashier at the counter, a boy no older than Marcus was when he first got his license, called me ma'am and offered to walk me to my car with an umbrella. I declined, but thanked him with the kind of warmth that mothers use to teach their sons, the kind that's gone missing from boys like mine. When I pulled into the driveway, I felt it again. That sensation, the prickle at the base of my neck, the pressure behind my eyes, the instinct honed not from trauma, but from age and motherhood, the sense that I was being watched. Amanda had left for a work meeting that morning, said she'd be gone till late. The cameras were all live, checked, reviewed. The locks were still green-lit and tight, but the moment I opened the front door, I felt it in my bones. Someone had been inside. The air had changed. Subtle things. The umbrella in the basket had been turned upside down. One of my slippers was a few inches off the mat. The coffee mug I'd rinsed and set on the counter last night was now bone dry, as if it had been toweled off and placed perfectly back. Then I saw it on the hallway console. A ring. Simple, gold, faintly scratched around the edges. James's wedding band. It had been buried with him. I froze. My eyes burned as tears threatened to rise, but I forced them back. Rage has a way of drying tears before they reach your cheeks. I stepped forward slowly, lifted the ring with 2 fingers, and set it into a small dish beside the keys. I couldn't let him see me unravel. Not now. I grabbed my phone and called Amanda. Voicemail. Something's happened. He's been here again. And he brought James's ring. Amanda, he dug it up. He dug up his father. I dropped the phone onto the couch and ran to the bathroom. My hands trembled as I splashed cold water on my face, trying to steady my breath. I looked into the mirror and whispered, "He wants you broken. He wants you to shatter." But I wouldn't. Not for him. Not for Marcus. Then came the knock. 3 short taps, deliberate, measured. I froze, towel still pressed to my cheeks. I peeked through the peephole. Marcus. Not a shadow. Not a memory. Not a voice on the phone. Flesh and blood. Right there on my porch. He looked clean. Trim. That pressed blue dress shirt he always wore to interviews, tucked neatly into slacks. His hair combed back, a pleasant smile vacant of sincerity, like he was running for mayor. I opened the door only part way, the chain still hooked. "Mother," he said smoothly, "you look well." "Why are you here, Marcus?" "Can't a son visit his mother? I heard you weren't feeling well. Thought I'd check in. You haven't answered my calls. You left your father's ring in my house." He blinked, then smiled wider. "Ah, so you did find it. I was wondering how long it'd take. Did you—" My voice broke. "Did you dig him up?" "Of course not," he said, laughing gently, like I'd made a charming mistake. "That's absurd. I simply kept a few things. Before the funeral, you were too distraught to notice." "You're lying." He leaned closer. "I'm reminding you, Mom, that you've become very forgetful lately. You forget who's here to help you, who's trying to take care of you. I don't need help." "Oh, but the courts may think otherwise," he said, eyes narrowing. "Especially if you keep making false accusations. Digging up graves? Do you hear yourself?" I shut the door in his face, the chain still rattling in its hinge. His voice came through the wood. I'm just here to collect a few papers. The medical forms, financials, things the state will want. No, you don't have a choice, Mother. Get off my property. I own half of it already. Silence. Then, a pause. He leaned close again. I could feel it like he was pressing his forehead to the door. You think Amanda can protect you? She's got a record. She's got secrets. Maybe I'll let the judge take a peek. He knocked once more, slow, heavy, and then he was gone. When Amanda returned, I was already seated at the table, the recorder between us. I pressed play. She listened to every word of our exchange. Thank God I'd turned it on the second I saw him. Her hands were shaking as she took notes. He's escalating, she muttered. He threatened you. I don't care about that, she said. I care that he mentioned the court. He's making moves, real ones. If he files a claim for power of attorney or guardianship, then what? Then we counter it. With evidence, with this recording, with the photos, with James's letters, and with your testimony. On the record, official. I nodded. But there was a thought dark and poisonous that I couldn't shake. He wanted us to go public. He wanted a battle. Because chaos is his camouflage. And in chaos, people stop asking the right questions. Amanda looked me in the eye. We're going to beat him, Ruth. But you have to be ready. I am. I didn't hesitate. Because something inside me had already shifted. I wasn't just a frightened mother anymore. I was a woman reclaiming the home, the love, and the truth that my son had tried to erase. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. The court date was set for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks until I'd have to sit in front of a judge and defend my sanity like it was a criminal offense. 2 weeks to prove that the boy I once held against my chest had turned into the man who now wanted to erase me, cell by cell, name by name. Amanda met with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Carla Wynn, who specialized in elder rights and had a voice like she'd smoked through 1,000 betrayals. Carla reviewed our materials with a clinical eye. The photos, the notes, James's hidden letter, Marcus's recorded threats. She called it compelling, but emotional. We'll need something heavier, Carla said, not unkindly. Something more difficult to twist in court. Financial trails, property filings, healthcare directives. It can't just be that he's cruel. We need to show intent, coercion, and if we can, premeditation. She paused, then looked at me. You said your husband was private. Did he keep journals? A safe? Emails? Anything that may prove he saw this coming? I shook my head, then stopped. There was one thing, a voicemail. Amanda perked up. You never mentioned a voicemail. I swallowed. Because I didn't think it mattered. It was after the first stroke. James's voice wasn't clear. He left it at 2 a.m. I thought it was just a goodbye. Do you still have it? I saved it. But it's on my old landline machine, the one in the attic. Carla stood. Then let's get it. Amanda and I drove to the house. It felt colder than usual, like the walls themselves had turned against me. Every picture frame felt watched. Every creak under my footstep accused me of failing to see what had grown in my own home. We climbed to the attic. Dust hung in the air like dandelion seeds. I found the answering machine in a box marked James, Office. Yellowed cords, tangled and stiff. Amanda plugged it into a portable power strip. The small green light blinked. 3 saved messages. The first was from a telemarketer, the second from our old church's food pantry, the third his voice. I hadn't heard it in over a decade. Ruth, if Marcus asks, don't tell him I'm in the hospital. He won't come. Or if he does, it won't be to help. I heard him last night, talking in the hallway. He didn't know I was awake. He said, things. He said when I'm gone, he'll be rich, that you'll be manageable. A small cleanup. His words, not mine. Ruth, I love you. Be careful. I'm sorry, The message cut off. I sat on the attic floor, stunned. Amanda wiped her eyes. Carla exhaled sharply. That, she said, isn't emotional. That's evidence. We uploaded the voicemail to a drive, saved it in 3 separate backups. Carla made plans to subpoena Marcus's financial activity, his work records, even his visits to local psychiatric clinics. She was good. She moved like someone who'd already seen the worst and didn't flinch. But I wasn't okay. That night, back at Amanda's house, I lay awake listening to the rain pound against the windows. I kept the recorder next to my pillow like a talisman. I felt something rising inside me, something deeper than grief or fear. I wanted justice. Not just for me, but for James. He tried to warn me, in the only way he could, and I hadn't been ready to hear it. Now I was. The next morning, Amanda handed me a burner phone. Don't use your cell unless it's an emergency. If Marcus has access to any data calls, texts, he'll twist it. I nodded, but something inside me had already hardened. I didn't care if he heard me anymore. I wanted him to. At 12:01 a.m. that night, the burner rang. No caller ID. I answered. Are you alone, Mom? I smiled. No, Marcus. I'm not. A pause. I think you're lying again. No, I'm not. Amanda's here, and I have your father's voicemail, and the pictures, and your words. You want a war? You've got one. He was quiet. Then, you don't want to do this. Yes, I said. I do. Click. Amanda looked at me from the hallway. You okay? I think so. But that was a lie, because the moment I turned back toward the living room, I saw something taped to the glass front door, a page torn from a book, an underlined sentence in red ink. Even queens fall when they forget who crowns them. Amanda grabbed it with gloves. No fingerprints, she muttered. Too smart for that. We called Carla, reported the threat. She contacted the court, filed for a temporary protective order. Marcus didn't respond. Not yet. But I knew he was watching, waiting, like a hunter who thinks his prey has wandered too far into the clearing. What he didn't know was, I wasn't prey anymore. I was the storm rolling back in, and this time, I had James's voice to prove it. The rain didn't stop the next day. It drummed against the porch roof like a warning from God, steady and sharp, as if heaven itself wanted to be sure I didn't forget what was coming. Amanda and I spent the morning organizing evidence for Carla, scanning documents, time-stamping recordings, cross-referencing every moment Marcus had stepped into my life and tried to carve pieces out of it. The binder we built was nearly 3 inches thick. We labeled it, For the Judge. At some point, Amanda left for a deposition in a nearby county. She insisted she'd be back by dinner, and that I lock every door behind her. She double-checked the cameras before she left. But I didn't tell her what I planned to do next. There were still places in my house I hadn't searched. Not out of laziness, out of fear. But fear was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. After Amanda's car disappeared down the road, I pulled out an old flashlight, grabbed my gloves, and returned to the master bedroom. James had once mentioned hiding cash for a rainy day. I'd never found it. I'd chalked it up to the kind of harmless dad joke he used to make to feel useful. But now I wondered if that joke had roots. The floorboards beneath his side of the bed had always creaked differently, lower, softer. I moved the bed frame aside and began tapping along the wood. 10 minutes in, I found it a hairline gap, barely the width of a fingernail. I pried it open with a butter knife. Inside, a small metal box, wrapped in an old t-shirt. Inside the box, 2 items. A roll of bills, hundreds, 20s, 50s, about $3,000 in total. And a leather-bound notebook. My hands shook as I lifted it out. It wasn't James's handwriting on the first page. It was Marcus's. I flipped through it, breath held. These weren't journal entries. They were plans. Pages of budgeting. Not for college, not for a wedding, but for my life. Estimate of home equity, $180K, potential after probate. Monthly Social Security, $1,400. Enough to cover minimal assisted living if she resists relocation. Note, do not liquidate until asset transfer is legally clean. I kept turning pages. Buried in between were notes on my medications, my routines, a record of my recent doctor visits, glucosamine refill every 28 days, increase mentions of memory lapses with neighbors, start summer, call Pastor Ron, suggest concern about mother's behavior. He had been building a narrative, slowly, carefully, a paper trail to support the story that I was losing my mind. And now, here it was in his own handwriting. My throat burned. The pages blurred in my hands. On the last page, a single line written in ink so dark it had bled through the paper. She won't see it coming. They never do. I snapped the notebook shut. It was no longer just suspicion. It was fact. Marcus hadn't lost his way. He'd chosen it, He was orchestrating my erasure like a man tuning a piano. Every note, every lie, every piece of misplaced kindness had been methodical. Amanda returned just before dusk. I handed her the notebook without saying a word. She read it in silence, then looked up at me, jaw tight. "We take this to Carla, tonight." And we did. Carla sat behind her desk like a general in a war room, flipping through the notebook with a kind of stillness that made the air feel heavier. "This," she said slowly, "is damning. Will it hold up? In any fair courtroom? Yes. This outlines intent, motive, and preparation. It contradicts his statements. It paints him as manipulative, calculating." "But?" I asked. "But fair courtrooms are rare," she said. "Especially when the accuser is a mother and the accused is a son with no prior arrests." She tapped the notebook. "But if he denies writing this, we'll need to prove otherwise. Handwriting analysis, timeline alignment, maybe even someone he confided in." Amanda leaned forward. "We can do that." Carla looked between us. "Ruth, I need to ask you something important." I nodded. "If Marcus is cornered, if he realizes he's lost, do you believe he's capable of hurting you physically?" I hesitated for a breath, and then I said it. "Yes," she nodded. "Then we escalate. Emergency protective order. We request supervised mediation. I'll call the judge personally." We left her office just after 8 p.m. The streets were wet, the night quiet. Amanda drove us back in silence, but the kind of silence filled with questions neither of us wanted to ask aloud. When we got home, the front porch light flickered as we approached. Just once. Just enough. Amanda froze. "Stay here," she whispered. She climbed the steps alone, checked the lock, the door frame, the window beside the entry. Nothing broken. She turned and gave me a nod. Clear. But the moment we stepped inside, the hallway smelled different. Like cologne. His cologne. Musky, sharp, the kind James had stopped using years ago, but Marcus always borrowed when he visited as a teenager. "Do you smell that?" I whispered. Amanda nodded. "Check the cameras." We reviewed the feed together. The hallway. Nothing. Kitchen. Nothing. Bedroom. A flash, barely a second, but enough. A shape. A man, standing beside my nightstand, looking down at something, and then, gone. Disappeared before the next frame. We rewound, paused, zoomed. It was Marcus. Amanda froze the screen and took a photo. He was here. Tonight. I walked to my room, heart like a war drum. Everything looked untouched. Except one thing. On my pillow, a small, laminated card. Marcus's handwriting again. 5 words. "Just come quietly, please, Mom." I sat on the bed. Not in fear. In fury. He still thought this was a game, a negotiation, that I'd bend, break, retreat. But I wouldn't, because I had the truth now. And the truth, once unearthed, doesn't go quietly. It demands to be heard. The courthouse smelled like lemon cleaner and old sweat justice in America, sterilized but never sweet. Amanda parked us in the lot across the street, and we sat in the car for a full minute before either of us moved. "You don't have to do this today," she said softly, hand on the key, engine still humming. "Yes, I do," I said. "If I don't, he wins." She looked at me like a sister might, seeing all the years behind my eyes. Then she nodded. We walked through security, and I clutched the manila envelope Carla had prepared like it was armor. Inside, photos, time-stamped footage, James's voicemail, the notebook from under the floorboards, and Marcus's laminated threat. We waited outside the clerk's office for 30 minutes. I stared at the floor tile, counting the specks in the grout to keep from shaking. When the assistant called my name, I stood, spine straight, voice steady. "I'm here to file a restraining order," I said, "and to report ongoing harassment by my adult son." The woman blinked, but only for a second. "Come with me, ma'am." Amanda followed, always 2 steps behind, like my shadow and my shield. Inside the small interview room, I told my story. Not just what Marcus had done, but who he had become. I talked about the phone calls at 12:01 a.m. The photo that reappeared on the altar, cut clean across my husband's face. The voicemail James left me, afraid of his own son. The binder Amanda built. The plan Marcus wrote out by hand. And I ended with the last thing he gave me, the card on my pillow. "Just come quietly. Please, Mom." The intake officer took it all down, typing with the kind of focus I hadn't seen since I used to work for the county library, back when facts mattered and words meant something. By the time we finished, the sun was climbing toward noon. They handed me a paper with bold black letters across the top. Temporary order of protection granted. Marcus was to stay 500 feet away from me at all times. No contact, no surveillance, no interference. Violating it would lead to immediate arrest. Carla met us outside the courtroom. "Next step is the hearing in 10 days, she said. "We'll present everything. You'll be safe until then." But I wasn't sure safe meant what it used to. That night, I stayed with Amanda again. We double-locked the doors. She made grilled cheese and tomato soup like we were kids hiding from a thunderstorm. Just after midnight, I woke to the sound of my name. Not a scream. Not a whisper. A voice, calm and smooth, coming from outside the window. "Ruth." I bolted upright. Amanda rushed in from the hallway, already holding her phone. We didn't go outside. We reviewed the camera. There he was, Marcus, standing in the yard like it was his birthright, holding up a white sign with red letters scrawled across it. "Drop the case. Come home." Amanda called the police. They arrived in 6 minutes. By then, Marcus was gone. But the camera had him. Clear face. Clear threat. This time, the responding officer was different. He wasn't polite. He wasn't indulgent. He was angry. "You've got a solid order here," he told me. "We'll pick him up. Probably tonight." And they did. At 2:43 a.m., we got the call. Marcus had been arrested in the parking lot of a 4-hour gym 20 minutes away. He had bolt cutters in his trunk, a map of my neighborhood marked with red X's, and something else, a copy of James's will, forged. The handwriting didn't match the official copy filed with the probate office, but it matched the notebook we'd found under the floorboards. Amanda stood beside me in the kitchen as I listened to the officer explain the charges. Violating a protective order, stalking, attempted fraud, tampering with legal documents. My knees nearly... But I didn't cry. I felt hollow, like a church after the choir leaves. The officer asked if I wanted to come down and ID him. I said no. I already had years ago. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. The next morning, Carla called. "He's been processed," she said. "They'll hold him overnight, maybe longer, depending on the magistrate." "Will he get bail?" "Maybe," she said. "But the forgery complicates things." "I never knew it would come to this," I said. She paused. "Ruth, it didn't come to this. It started here. You just finally caught up." I hung up and stared out Amanda's kitchen window. It was quiet. Birds hopped across the grass. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere, someone was burning a candle that smelled like vanilla. The world hadn't ended, but mine had changed. I returned home that afternoon, alone. Amanda offered to come, but I needed to face it, to reclaim it. The porch was still, the cameras intact. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. I lit a candle on James's altar, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted light. I sat on the couch and opened my journal, and I wrote the date, April 17, the day I filed charges against my son, the day I chose truth over silence, the day I began to breathe again. 3 days had passed since Marcus's arrest. My house had begun to feel like mine again. The air had changed, warmer somehow, more forgiving. I walked from room to room barefoot, windows open, letting the scent of lilacs drift through the curtains. It should have felt like peace, but I'd lived long enough to know peace often walks hand in hand with the next storm. On the 4th morning, a knock came at the door. It wasn't the kind of knock Marcus used, no heavy demand, no threat folded into the wood. This one was softer, polite, but still unexpected. I peeked through the peephole. A woman stood there. Late 60s, maybe early 70s, neatly dressed in a pale blue blouse, beige skirt, and a wide straw hat with a navy ribbon. She held a purse close to her chest and shifted from foot to foot like someone with something heavy to say. I opened the door, but left the screen latched. "Can I help you?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "You don't know me, Miss Delaney, but I know your son." I stiffened. "You'll have to be more specific." "My name is Nadine," she said. "I used to live 2 houses down from him. He helped my husband with some yard work. This was, 8 or 9 years back." My heart started ticking faster. He told me you'd passed away, she added softly. I blinked. He what? Nadine looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I wouldn't have come here if I hadn't seen the news. About his arrest. I needed to talk to you. I hesitated, then unlatched the screen and let her in. She walked slowly, like her knees weren't what they used to be. I offered her the recliner. She sat, smoothing the fabric of her skirt. He used to come by every other Thursday, she said, helped with groceries, even fixed a leaky faucet once, always polite, quiet. But there was something in his eyes, like he was trying on kindness instead of wearing it. I said nothing, just listened. One day, I asked about his family. He said he had no one left, said his father had died and his mother, well, he said you'd been gone a long time. She looked up, her eyes kind and sad. I think he was practicing grief, she said, getting good at it before he needed it. I felt something inside me twist. What made you come now? She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. He left this at my house months ago. I didn't read it at first, thought it was private, but after the news I felt, I don't know, responsible maybe. She handed it to me. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Marcus. Inside were pages of lists, names of local retirement homes, state-funded mental health facilities, lawyers known for elder conservatorship cases, but also notes on manipulation techniques, guilt layering, isolation reinforcement, cognitive dissonance patterning. It read like a textbook written by someone who wanted to be a puppeteer. He was studying how to control people, I whispered. Nadine nodded. It scared me. Me too, I said. But not anymore. She squeezed my hand before leaving. I lost my son too, she said at the door. But not to death, to cruelty. It's a different kind of mourning. When she left, I copied the notebook and sent it straight to Carla. She called me within the hour. This, she said, is our closing argument. Premeditation, psychological coercion, intent to isolate. It's all here. We'll file to submit it as supplemental evidence. The hearing is in 4 days. This seals it. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I sat by the window for hours, staring at the swing James built from an old tire and 2 ropes. Marcus had fallen off it once when he was 9. He cried so hard he hiccuped for 15 minutes. James carried him inside, kissed his scraped elbow and told him, bravery isn't not falling, it's standing back up when you do. Marcus had believed that. Then, somewhere along the way, he began to push people off the swing instead. That night, I lit a candle for James, and one for Nadine's son, and one for the woman I used to be before I knew what kind of war could live inside your own family tree. The cameras stayed on, the doors locked. But I slept, and in the morning, I made breakfast like a woman expecting no ghosts. Because sometimes, survival looks like pancakes for one and orange juice in a glass you washed yourself. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with the care of a woman preparing for battle. Not flashy, not frail, just honest. Navy blue dress, small gold cross necklace James had given me on our 25th anniversary, hair pulled back in a soft bun. I looked like someone's mother, someone's widow, someone who'd earned the right to be believed. Amanda met me outside the courthouse. She wore her signature gray blazer, but today she'd swapped the jeans for pressed black slacks. Her face was calm, but I knew her hands were curled into fists inside those pockets. You ready? She asked. No, I replied honestly, but I'm here. That's enough. We walked in together, side by side. The courtroom was small, tucked in a corner of the City Hall building, ceiling tiles stained from years of summer heat and leaky roofs. The judge was a middle-aged black woman with sharp eyes and a tired kindness that reminded me of women I used to pray beside on Sunday mornings. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, clean-cut in a gray suit that didn't quite fit right. His expression was unreadable. Not angry, not smug, just blank. The kind of blank that chilled me more than rage ever could. He looked at me only once. I didn't flinch. Carla began our side with clarity and precision. She presented the voicemail from James, the photographs, the cut-up image on the altar, the surveillance footage, the laminated threats. Then she handed the judge the notebook we found beneath the floorboards. Finally, she introduced Nadine as a surprise witness. The judge raised an eyebrow. The court accepts. Nadine, wearing the same straw hat, took the stand and told her story. The judge listened intently, nodding occasionally, her pen moving quickly across the notepad. Then came Marcus's turn. His attorney was a man in an expensive suit and an insincere tie, the kind that smiled with his teeth but not his eyes. He called Marcus to the stand. That's when the performance began. "My mother has struggled with paranoia since I was a child," Marcus said. "It got worse after my father passed. She started seeing things, hearing things. I tried to help. I even looked into care options." "Did you ever threaten her?" the lawyer asked. "Never. I was worried. She took my concern as an attack." "And the photos? The voicemail?" "I can't explain those," he said smoothly. "Maybe she edited them. Maybe someone else did. And the notebook found under the floorboards?" He paused, then smiled. "That isn't my handwriting." Carla stood immediately. "Your Honor, we have a certified handwriting expert who has reviewed both the notebook and multiple documents Marcus submitted to the court. The analysis shows a 96% match." The judge raised her hand. "I've read the report. Please continue." Marcus's lawyer fumbled for a moment, but the damage was done. The tone had shifted. The judge called a brief recess. Amanda and I stepped into the hallway. "He's losing," Amanda said. "You can see it on the judge's face." "I don't want revenge," I whispered. "I just want the truth to stick, to live somewhere other than my body." Back inside, the judge returned with her ruling. The evidence presented overwhelmingly supports the petitioner's claims of coercion, psychological abuse, and manipulation. The court finds in favor of Ruth Delaney and grants a full restraining order for the maximum allowable duration 5 years. Furthermore, the court refers this case to the district attorney for possible criminal charges related to fraud and forgery. Mr. Marcus Delaney is ordered to cease all contact, direct or indirect, and is to vacate any shared property within 72 hours. Marcus stood. He looked right at me. His face didn't twist, his eyes didn't burn. But I saw it, the smallest crack in the mask, the fear of someone who no longer held the script. He turned and walked out without a word. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. Amanda hugged me tight. "You did it." "No," I said. "We did." Outside, the sun was brighter than it had been in weeks. It warmed my skin like a reward I hadn't dared expect. As we walked to the car, Carla caught up with us. "We're not done," she said, eyes fierce. "There'll be hearings, possible indictments. He won't be able to touch you again, but he'll try to spin it. Stay ready." "I will." That evening, back home, I walked through every room, not to check locks, but to reclaim them. I sat at James's altar and lit a fresh candle. Then I wrote a letter, not to Marcus, but to myself. "You survived. You spoke. You were believed. That is justice enough." When I turned off the lights and crawled into bed, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, earned, and finally, it was mine. 2 weeks passed without a call, a knock, a shadow. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my mornings were my own again. I started waking up early, just as the birds began their morning choir. I'd make myself a pot of chamomile tea, sit on the porch with James's flannel wrapped around my shoulders, and listen to the world without fear. No Marcus at the end of the driveway. No threat hanging from the mailbox, just dew on the grass and the soft creak of the swing James hung decades ago. But trauma doesn't vanish. It lingers like smoke in the curtains, like footsteps on old stairs. And somewhere in the quiet, I began to wonder what if it wasn't over. Amanda kept checking in. She brought over groceries, helped install new door locks, and insisted I carry pepper spray even around the house. "I know he's not allowed within 500 feet, but that doesn't mean he'll care," she reminded me. "I understand," I said, but I didn't add the truth. My fear wasn't of Marcus returning with rage. It was him returning with silence. One morning, as I was watering the rose bushes James had planted the spring before Marcus was born, I noticed something strange. There was a disturbance in the mulch, just a small patch under the oldest bush, like someone had knelt there recently. I leaned down, brushed the soil gently, and saw it. An envelope, cream-colored, no stamp, no return address. Just my name in cursive Mom written in Marcus's hand. I didn't open it immediately. I sat on the garden bench for a long time, envelope in my lap, watching the wind pass through the leaves. Part of me wanted to tear it up and toss it in the compost bin. Another part knew it might be bait, but another part, the part that once braided his hair when he was a boy, the part that stayed up during his fevers, needed to know. Inside the envelope, 3 pages, handwritten. No apology, no signature, just words. I didn't plan to hate you. That was the first sentence. He wrote about James. About growing up in a house where love felt like something earned through chores and good grades. How, in his mind, James had always loved me more than him. How Amanda's loyalty to me felt like betrayal. How his own failures became proof, in his head, that I didn't care enough. He described the planning not out of malice, he claimed, but out of desperation. I didn't want to destroy you. I wanted to replace you, because it felt easier than confronting why I couldn't be loved by you the way I saw you love Dad. He wrote that the notebook we found was real but not the whole plan, that there had been a second version, one he destroyed when he realized he'd gone too far. I scared myself. The night I left the ring on the console, I sat in the car for an hour after. I cried. I haven't done that since I was a boy. I thought about walking back inside and begging you to forgive me, but I knew I wouldn't mean it. Not fully. Not then. And the final paragraph. If I disappear, don't come looking. Don't try to save me. Maybe this is what I needed to finally be seen for what I am. You were right to fight me. You saved yourself. And Amanda, I hope you don't feel guilt. You were just the first person I couldn't outmaneuver. And maybe that's what I was looking for all along. I read it 3 times. The tears came slowly, not the kind that sting, but the kind that simply are, the kind that have no rage left behind them. I didn't call Amanda right away. I didn't call Carla. I didn't record the letter. I simply folded it, placed it in James's old toolbox in the garage, and locked it. Some truths don't need to be part of a case file. Some are just meant to be held. That evening, Amanda stopped by with lasagna and garlic bread. We ate at the kitchen table with Jazz playing softly on the radio. She noticed something in my expression. What happened? Nothing, I said. But I think the story's changed. Are you okay? I don't know, I said. But I'm not afraid anymore. We took our plates to the sink. Outside, the sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn. I watched the roses sway gently in the wind. Something buried had been found, and something broken had been seen. It didn't mean healing was finished, but it meant it had begun. The letter Marcus left under the rosebush never left my mind, but I did what survivors do. I placed it on an invisible shelf in my heart and went on living. For the first time in what felt like decades, I truly lived. I began volunteering at the church again. I joined a walking group with a few women from my old quilting circle, and every Sunday morning, I sat in the 3rd pew from the front, where James and I used to hold hands during the offertory hymn. I even started writing again, short reflections at first, just journal entries meant to remind me that I still had a voice. But on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I received a letter in the mailbox. This one came by post, real stamp, return address. The sender? J. Sandoval Correctional Center. My hands trembled, but I didn't hesitate this time. Inside, another letter from Marcus, typed, formal, but not cold. Dear Mom, it began. I was processed through county and transferred to Sandoval last week. My lawyer says my charges are still pending. No one here knows anything about that. They just know my number and my meals and the fact that I don't talk much. He described his days. 5 a.m., wake-ups, tasteless eggs, a bunkmate who snored like a chainsaw. He said he'd joined a literacy program and was tutoring inmates trying to get their GEDs. There's something funny about teaching grown men how to sound out vowels while remembering I tried to gaslight the woman who taught me how to read. I didn't smile, but I felt something shift. He was writing now not to manipulate me but to confess. And yet, confession isn't the same as redemption. I knew that. I also knew that time, not tears, would reveal his truth. The letter closed like this. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to write back. I just needed you to know I remember what I did. All of it. And I don't expect to walk out of here as your son again. But I'd like to walk out human. I folded the letter and placed it next to the first one, inside James's toolbox. This time, though, I didn't lock it. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of peppermint tea and opened a fresh journal. I wrote, You don't always get the apology you need. Sometimes you get the awareness that no apology can undo the harm. But if that awareness is real, if it doesn't come dressed in excuses or decorated with guilt, it becomes something else. Not a fix, but a floor, a place to stand. The next morning, Amanda showed up with 2 strong coffees and a newspaper under her arm. Her eyes scanned me. "You're quiet," she said. I slid the letter across the table. She read it once, then looked up at me. "Are you okay?" "I think so. Do you want to write back?" I took a long sip of coffee and thought about that. "No," I said. "Not yet." That afternoon, I returned to the garden. I pruned the roses, replanted the marigolds, and found myself humming a tune James used to sing when he grilled outside on Saturdays. The kind of tune that didn't belong to any song, just rhythm and memory. I didn't expect what I found tucked behind the bird bath. A small, carved piece of wood. It had been there for years, probably since the last time Marcus helped James with yard work. I picked it up. A whittled heart. My initials. James's. And, surprisingly, Marcus's. A triangle. Family. Before everything fell apart, I ran my fingers across it, then set it on the porch rail. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was history. And history, when looked at plainly, can become a map. Later that week, Carla called. "The DA will move forward with charges," she said. "You won't need to testify unless Marcus contests." "Will he?" I asked. "I doubt it. Sounds like he's, well, coming to terms." "I hope so." "You okay, Ruth?" I paused, then smiled softly. "Carla, I'm 59 years old. My husband is gone. My son tried to erase me, but somehow I'm still here. I get up every day. I water my plants. I talk to my daughter. I'm okay not because the world's safe, but because I stopped expecting it to be." She didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, "That's the wisest thing I've heard all year." I thanked her and hung up. Then I stood in the doorway of my home, the same home that had once held secrets, screams, and silence, and I exhaled. Because it now held something else. Truth. And in that truth, I was building something better. Not a monument. Not a wall. But a life. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. Amanda and I cooked together in my kitchen. She did the heavy lifting with the turkey, and I managed the sweet potato casserole and cranberry chutney, the way James had liked it. We set 2 places at the table but filled the room with enough warmth for 10. No extended family, no loud conversations, just us. And that was enough. "I know it's a weird holiday this year," Amanda said, as she poured gravy into the boat James's mother had passed down. "But I'm glad we're doing this." "I am too," I said. "Quiet isn't empty. Sometimes it's just peaceful." We ate, we laughed, we even shared a little wine. After dessert, Amanda pulled out an old photo album and we sat on the couch flipping through pages. There was James at the grill, Amanda, as a teenager with that ridiculous side ponytail, and Marcus grinning, gap-toothed, holding a snow globe. "I'd forgotten how sweet he looked," Amanda murmured, her finger tracing the photo. "Before everything," I nodded. He was. For a time, at exactly 7:02 p.m., the phone rang. Not the landline. My cell. Unknown number. Amanda's eyes snapped to mine. "Don't answer if you're not ready." I stared at the screen for 3 rings. Then I pressed accept. "Hello?" A pause. Then, "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." It was Marcus. His voice was lower, steadier, lacking that clipped arrogance he'd once worn like cologne. I didn't respond right away, just listened. "I was told I could make 1 call today," he continued. "They said it had to be under 15 minutes. I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I understand." Another pause. "Are you safe?" he asked. "I am," I said. "And you?" He chuckled, a small, bitter sound. "Safe? I suppose. They serve turkey in compartments. No stuffing." I waited. "I wanted to say," he began, then faltered. "I know it doesn't mean much now, but I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For not letting me win." I blinked. Of all the things I expected to hear, that wasn't one. "I didn't understand it before," he said, "but I do now. The way you kept fighting it didn't mean you hated me. It meant you still believed I had something worth fighting against." I sat down, the photo album still open beside me. A younger version of Marcus smiled up from the page. "I don't know if I can ever fix what I did," he continued, "but I've started therapy here. I've been writing letters to myself, mostly. There's a chaplain who leads a support group for men dealing with generational trauma. It's not easy, but I go." "That's a start," I said softly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he added quickly. "I just wanted you to know I'm trying." "I believe you," I said. "Trying matters." The silence on the line stretched again. Amanda placed a warm hand over mine and whispered, "You don't have to say anything more," but I did. "I don't know what happens when you get out," I said into the phone. "I don't know if we'll ever have Sunday dinners or long talks on the porch, but I want you to know if you keep trying, if you keep choosing honesty over harm, then yes, Marcus. You'll walk out human." A sound caught in his throat. He cleared it. "Thank you, Mom. I'm not the one who needs convincing," I said. "That's between you and yourself." The timer beeped on his end. "Time's up," he said quietly. "I'll write soon. I'll be here." He hung up. The room was still. Amanda squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "I think I am." We sat like that for a while, the two of us, surrounded by candlelight and old photographs. Later, I stepped out onto the porch with my tea and watched the wind move the branches. I thought about forgiveness not as a gift you hand over, but as a door you choose to leave unlocked. Not so someone can walk back in, but so you can finally walk out. Spring came early that year. The cherry blossoms along the back fence bloomed in late March, weeks ahead of schedule, as if nature herself had decided I'd earned a little beauty. I tended the garden every morning, planting bulbs I hoped to see rise in the months ahead. Life, even after all the darkness, had its own rhythm, and I'd finally stopped resisting it. I hadn't heard from Marcus in a few weeks. He'd sent 2 more letters since Thanksgiving, both thoughtful, both handwritten. The last one included a poem he'd written in group therapy. It wasn't great by any literary measure, but it was sincere. He signed it with his full name, Marcus Jonathan Delaney. Not your son, not M, just himself. One afternoon in April, I went to visit James. His grave sat beneath a tall pine tree, near the edge of the cemetery where sunlight filtered through the branches in long, trembling lines. I brought fresh lilies and a small wooden carving Marcus's whittled heart that I'd found months ago in the garden. I placed it next to the headstone. I sat on the bench nearby and spoke aloud. "James," I said, voice barely louder than a breath, "it's been 3 years, and you'd never believe the mess we walked through, but I think you'd be proud. Not because I did everything right, but because I didn't stop." A bird chirped above me, loud and clear. "Marcus is still inside," I continued, "but he's trying. And Amanda, she's been my rock. She's more like you than she knows. Steady, fierce when it counts, always with her feet planted on the ground." I reached out and ran my hand along the cool marble of his name. "I miss you, every day. But I stopped talking to the ghost of you in the hallway. I stopped lighting candles out of fear. Now I light them for warmth, for memory, for love." I stood and looked down at the inscription. James Malcolm Delaney, beloved husband and father. For a long time, I'd considered replacing the last word, just crossing out father and carving friend, or protector. But I no longer needed to rewrite history to make peace with it. He had been a father, and Marcus had been a son, even if both roles had cracked along the way. As I turned to leave, I noticed something tucked under the bouquet I'd placed weeks ago, a small envelope. Weather-worn, edges curled, I almost missed it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, but unsigned. "I am learning how to carry both truth and shame in the same pocket. I am learning that love cannot be stolen, it must be given freely. I am learning that sometimes justice isn't a punishment, it's a mirror." I folded the paper carefully and pressed it to my chest. Then I tucked it beneath the wooden heart and left it with James. Let them keep each other company. The next day, Amanda and I drove 2 hours to a small town where an organization held monthly workshops for adult survivors of familial betrayal. It wasn't therapy, it was just a circle. Chairs, coffee, stories told in low voices, tears wiped with napkins. I didn't share the first week, but I listened, and that was enough. When we drove back, Amanda rolled down the windows, and we let the wind whip through the car like laughter. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. 3 months later, I received a certified letter. Marcus had been approved for early parole, pending a psychological evaluation and community housing arrangement. He'd qualified for a re-entry program that emphasized mentorship, job placement, and restorative dialogue. The letter included a contact sheet. One of the lines read, "Family contact upon release. Optional. Mother, Ruth Delaney." There was a box next to it, unmarked, a space waiting for an answer. I stared at it for a long time. Then, quietly, with no one watching, I marked it. Yes, not because I had forgotten, not because I needed to be needed, but because I believed in consequences and compassion, because I believed in boundaries and bridges, because I believed, finally, in myself. That summer, I held a dinner in my backyard. Not for Marcus, not yet, but for Amanda, Carla, Nadine, a few of the women from the workshop. We ate under string lights and laughed over peach cobbler. As the sun set, I stood and raised a glass. "To the ones who survived," I said, "and to the ones who still might." They clinked glasses with me. The wind stirred the chimes on the porch. And somewhere deep inside, I felt it. Not just peace, but home. Full stop. The story is a powerful reminder that healing isn't the absence of pain, it's the courage to confront it. It teaches us that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through quiet strength, steady truth, and unwavering boundaries. Ruth's journey shows that even when betrayal comes from those we love most, we still have the right to choose dignity, to protect ourselves, and to walk toward peace not because we forget, but because we remember with clarity. In the end, survival isn't about erasing the past, it's about reclaiming your future.